It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre. Hey, I'm Tara, one of your hosts of the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast. This season, you'll notice we're doing things a little bit differently. Firstly, we're going to be having some very special guests join us. And secondly, we're going to be repurposing some really awesome older content from before the start of the podcast, when we were broadcasting only to our Let's Talk Polyamory private Facebook group. Included in this is our popular alphabet series, where we went through the alphabet discussing terms and concepts, not only just related to non-monogamy and polyamory, but covering things like sexuality, identity, wellness, and so on. And all of these terms and more are going to be included in our picture book, which is going to be released later in 2025. Super exciting. And now on to the episode.
Hello.
How's everyone today? We'd love for you to say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from, and if you have any questions about today's topic. So,
what are we talking about today, Tara? Since it's our E-Day.
We did another poll, and I know how much you like polls.
I love polls.
And the winner was ethical non-monogamy, which is interesting because we talked about consensual non-monogamy only a few weeks ago. Right. If you missed that, in that one we went into detail about the different types of consensual non-monogamy, but we thought we would show you the diagram that we did then. So let's jump in. So we decided to do ethical non-monogamy because it had the most votes, but also because we want to take a little different approach today and talk more about the questions people ask us when they're coming in the group or in the group or in other groups, and that we hear about what makes ethical non-monogamy ethical.
Yeah, it's a great question. And how does it differ from CNM, right? From being consensually non-monogamous? And I think really the idea is that there's the ethical part to it. So they are both ethical, right? If you're consenting to it, but the ethics is implying that you really do have that other person's awareness of it, their consent, their knowledge of it, and they are in fact participating in it as opposed to being coerced in it, or you simply taking it upon yourself to make your own sidetrack, your own feelings and stuff, right?
Exactly. So some of the definitions we found online is that ethical non-monogamy suggests that it's a practice of taking part in a romantic relationship that is not exclusive between two people. And then consensual non-monogamy being committed romantic, again, there's that word romantic, relationship where all partners consent to sexual and or romantic encounters with other consenting partners. So I think we were having a discussion earlier about the term romantic. And does it have to be romantic in order to be CNM or ENM? I'm not sure I agree
with the romantic. And it's interesting because yes, in more than two of the definitions they were really making emphasis on putting in that romantic, but by what criteria do we define the relationship to be romantic? What if it is just one-offs, or what if it is a physical thing, or what if there's not that much romance? I mean, it goes beyond that, right? But it's the idea that there is some type of relationship going on outside of the traditions of one-on-one relationships.
And probably that it's ongoing, maybe, because I think if it was just a one-off, it might be considered more like hookups. I don't know.
But okay.
But it doesn't matter.
But even if it is hookups, even if it is just going to parties or doing whatever it is that your yum is, it's the idea that you're going to be transparent in it, right? The ethics of being open and candid about it, that you are not in any way holding back things, that you are not in any way not being forthcoming. You are putting it out there, and that the other person can then consent to it. They can say, yes, this is for me, or no, I'm not into it. It's not my shtick. It's not my deal. I don't want to be part of that.
That's true.
And that's really where it comes from. So the details of how it manifests itself, whether it's, going into the showers at the locker room, whether it's going to, car dates or whatever it might be. Well, those facts and figures become secondary. They're irrelevant. It's the idea you're in a relationship with somebody, whatever that form is, and you are being honest and open about it, so that the other person might then really be informed as to what they're consenting to.
Okay. So we're going to get into a bit more of that, but I thought just for review, we would share the diagram that we shared,
diagram.
the types of relational identities.
And we got this from Polysecure, right? From Jessica Fern.
So they range from in segments of high sexual exclusivity to low sexual exclusivity,
right.
and then high emotional exclusivity, it's hard to say, and low emotional exclusivity. So the various types there and how they sort of fit generally.
Can I do a little sidebar just for a second?
Sure.
I wonder. Well, yes, I wonder what it is about your having exclusivity that makes it difficult for you to say. Is there something there?
Yeah, for sure.
You're not wanting to be exclusive.
I definitely don't want to be exclusive. I'd say we fit in the lower right-hand corner.
The lower right-hand corner.
Yeah, so polyamorous. I would consider myself polyamorous.
Now that's an interesting thing. How does polyamorous differ from, let's say, swinging or being ethically non-monogamous to, open that? What's the difference?
Or like monogamish?
Sure.
So I think we do engage in some swinging activities where we go to clubs or parties and that sort of thing, and we meet people. So to me, that's more interactional, more sexual, and there might not be an ongoing aspect to it. There may be or may not be an ongoing relationship or aspect, whereas I see that polyamory is more where you have multiple people that you're amorous or have love for, and you may have an ongoing relationship with them.
So there's an emotional component to being polyamorous?
I would say so. And you're emotionally connected to your partners.
So could you be...
You want to leave this up?
Could you be polyamorous and yet be with somebody who you're not having sex with, that you're not being physically intimate with?
For sure. You can, that would be polyamorous and asexual.
But I wonder how that differs from your parents' relationships with their friends. I mean, they're emotionally invested with them, right? So how would they not then be considered to be polyamorous with their friends? How does it...
I think it's more about attraction. Yeah, so you don't have to have sex to have attraction and have intimacy with someone. So it's more, I would say it's more of an intimate relationship that doesn't include sex. Okay. What would you say?
Yeah,
is that a test?
No, no, it's for consideration, no test. I just think that it's interesting consideration because a lot of it is sex-based and sexual in nature. There is that question of, well, I'm polyamorous. I love it. It's almost a given that it's going to be sexual nature, but we know on the spectrum that some people may not have that sexual demonstration and yet still feel that there is a kind of romantic quality to it, an attraction to it beyond platonic, beyond it being...
Right.
So it's not necessarily simply demonstrated in the physical sexual part. It can go beyond that.
Right, but that might fall into the poly-intimates. We talked a bit about that last week. If you want more information on, we went through the definitions of all those different types. So let's go through what makes ethical non-monogamy ethical.
Good question.
So, and then you were saying, and I thought this was good, is that even within this, what your interpretation of what is ethical is also the thing. Right.
So what I mean by that is, am I writing the definition that it's going to suit me well, right? So it's ethical because, like, I just told her, well, I'm not really ready for a long-term relationship. Is that being truly ethical?
Right.
Like, so what's my understanding of it, and what do I define it as, and what is your understanding of it, and what do you define it as? Ideally, we'd like to be as transparent as possible, so there's less misunderstanding, miscommunication, but that we might be forthcoming with it and know that we're on the same page. We have a similar understanding too.
Right. Right. And I think you said earlier, the ethical might distinguish it from infidelity or coerced relationships, because lots of people are non-monogamous, but they make, I think we heard a stat that it's about 50% are engaged in non-monogamy, but that doesn't mean that they're ethically or consensually non-monogamous.
If you say, well, I'm in a close relationship, I'm married, for example, and yet I've got a girlfriend on the side, but my wife doesn't really know about it, it doesn't seem as though there's that much ethical consideration, right? But you are non-monogamous because you've got your thing going on. It makes me think a little bit almost about the don't ask, don't tell idea. So maybe we don't have to know all the details and being ethically open about it, letting the other person know, but they know that there is somebody that we are outside of a closed relationship, right? So,
what about when people have like unspoken agreements?
What are you thinking? Like what?
Oh, like when people are married and they appear to be monogamous and their agreement is monogamy, but there's one or both believe that there's an understanding, scare quotes,
a nonverbal communication.
Nonverbal communication that they can have other partners. I think that happens commonly. But sometimes I think people want to believe that that's their unspoken agreement too. So that's another thing.
Right. And its question is then, what would stop us from speaking about it? What makes it that a nonverbal communication, nonverbal agreement is the way to go? What am I resistant to? What am I possibly concerned or afraid of? What's going to happen if we do announce it? Do I have this idea that you're some way not going to accept it, or that maybe you're going to say something that might be fearful or difficult for me to accept? So then we kind of go about it without really being as transparent about it. The reason why we want to emphasize this transparency, this openness to it, this ethical aspect of it, is that we can eliminate future drama. We can eliminate or try to eliminate misunderstandings. So if we're putting all our cards on the table, if we're trying to be as candid as possible, then we can really announce our position, ask the other person how they feel about it, what are they wanting, what are they not wanting, and we can come to agreements about it. But really, the dividend in all of this is feeling comfortable in our own skin, knowing that we have been transparent, we have been ethical, we've been considerate of the other, as opposed to just being evasive or being cheating or all those things. It's really going to bring about a different level of security. And when we feel secure in our relationship, well, then we're bound by little. We are able to explore much more and have a more loving and encompassing universe.
Yes, so communication and transparency. But I think it's the thing that people most fear is that this is something they want, even communicating it in the first place to a partner, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship with someone and it's either something that you've wanted for a while or something that you've been recently considering. I think that's where it makes it difficult. And sometimes people do engage in unethical behavior before having those conversations.
Right. So what might be the consideration? What might the fear be that if we were going to announce it? What concerns might we have about it?
Yeah, that the partner might say no. What happens if they say no?
Right. What happens if they say yes? What happens if they say yes? Actually, I've been thinking about the same thing for some time now, and I would love to see other people as well.
Yeah, and for sure that happens.
Well, can we tolerate that? It's one thing for me to have desires of wanting to see other people, but for you to have desires to see other people too. Can my ego withstand that, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's sometimes the thing as well,
sometimes.
Right? Yeah, people imagine themselves being engaging with others, but then can't imagine their partner.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's our narcissistic fantasies that might have some interruption there.
Yeah.
But if we are secure in ourselves, and then by extension, perhaps secure in a relationship, we might be able to tolerate that, and even go beyond tolerate that. We might enjoy, we might benefit from that, because we would be essentially living our true selves, living our desires, living the things that fit right for us, fit well for us.
And part of the way of doing that is talking about, like we said, communication, transparency, talking about needs, desires, wants, but also having agreements around how the relationship will work. Like, how do you want it to work? And it may be a stage thing. Like, you might start in one position when you start, like we did, and then move forward.
Sure.
And you're constantly making sure everyone understands what agreements you have and agreeing to it, and then carrying those out and making changes and reviewing as needed. Like the quarterly review that you always talk about.
Well, yeah, for sure. Our little business of TNA, we have quarterly meetings, and we assess it, and we say, well, how is this working? And if anything ever happens, if there's a pipe that bursts, well, then we hold a meeting immediately, and we say, look, this isn't working. We've got, something that needs to be addressed. But also the agreements that we have are not set in stone. We are plastic by nature. We will change with scenarios, we'll change from day to day, thoughts and feelings come up. So we're always open to amendments, to being able to come to the table and talk about it and negotiate what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, I think that's one of the missteps that people take when they're starting in non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, is not having those conversations and agreements and assuming things. And then things happen. And what I found with some of my clients is their activities and desires get ahead of their agreements. So it's important to making sure you take time and stop and plan things out. And I know that doesn't sound fun and sexy. Like, it's fun and sexy to say, like, let's just go for it. Let's go to a party, or let's do these things. But it's super important when you're beginning and ongoing to have these conversations. We've actually talked about this in a couple of our lives, like what to do when you're going on your first date, how to approach sex parties and stuff like that. But I think it's often the thing that gets missed. Or sometimes I think people agree to things that they don't really want. And I think that's hard.
Right, being able to say no or really express what it is you're wanting. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes we want to just run into it, jump into it, and go to it because that's the fun part. But we're building a love mansion, and we have to start with a good foundation, right? So if we don't have a good foundation, then the rest of the mansion is going to be kind of unstable. But if we can really come to terms with it, figure out and build this foundation together, then we will feel secure. And when we have a secure foundation, sky's the limit.
Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes the situations happen as well. I know there was a question in the group about what happens when you start on a journey and one person wants to continue to be polyamorous and the other one doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when there's a shift, when we find out that it's no longer working for us.
Yeah. So that's, again, when it's time to review those agreements and what might work. And that's, I think, also time when it's helpful to talk to someone about it, like a professional or
absolutely, yes, because you might get another perspective. You might be able to have that negotiation, have the aid of having that negotiation done with a third party. But it's really about the idea, do we feel comfortable in saying what we're wanting and not wanting, and how can we allow for that? How can we get that? Am I the type of person who's simply going to say what I want and let the other person have to deal with it? Or am I the type of person perhaps who is reluctant to say what I want because of an overestimation of how the other person might receive it? They might reject that, they might reject me. Am I secure enough to say what it is that I really want and not want? So we don't necessarily want to be selfish about it, but we want to be self-advocating where we can say what it is we're wanting and know that the other person will say what they're wanting, and then we'll find out where is there enough commonality that we're able to make this viable, or do we come to the realization that it's not? And perhaps it is that it's not, but it's better to know ahead of time than to just string it along and not getting what we want, having them not get what we want, feeling resentful about it, having arguments, having that trauma, right? So we talk about it.
I can see someone's commenting when one partner falls in love with a play partner.
That's often a concern for people, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can go out on dates, but just don't fall in love with the person. But how do we regulate that?
That can't be an agreement. I feel like that's not an agreement.
That's an unrealistic agreement.
Yeah, I would think so.
Well, that's interesting. So we can then make some type of agreement in our mind that says, well, you can do all these physical things, but emotionally, you have to restrict yourself from doing this thing. I don't want you falling in love with somebody else because what? You might love them more than me and you might leave me for them?
Someone's saying exactly. Yeah, I think that's what people fear. But I don't know. The question would be is, do you have space to love more than one, right? And I believe you can. So it is a possibility, but I don't know if you can stop yourself from falling in love with somebody. Sometimes at the beginning, I think it's a bit of new relationship energy. And that's an issue I think people face all the time is like, there's a new person. It's exciting. It's different. You don't see them as often.
They're not really known to us yet. Right? So we can project all of our fantasies on them. We don't know that they leave the cap off the toothpaste and their bothers. Not that you do.
They leave the lights on.
Right. So
when they walk out of the room.
Yeah, whatever it is that might bother you, whatever you already know about your current partner, you project all these other fantasies onto the other one. But when the infatuation wears off, is it really? But we're kind of going.
Yeah, we're going off. I think Wendy's saying, I believe we have unlimited capacity for love. Yeah.
Yes, and I believe that too. But
yes,
do we feel secure enough when our partner might express these desires, these gratifications with the other person? Do we feel, well, it's going to take away from my love? Do you essentially subscribe to a universe of abundance? Do you believe that they're still going to have love and room for you? Or are you feeling as though you're going to be second, third, or just left by the wayside? So are you secure in your relationship, or are you secure with yourself? But it's interesting. The idea that, we might try to limit the person's emotional involvement while granting them physical things. We might say, well, you can do this, that, and the other thing, but emotionally, I want you to refrain from doing this. And how might you be able to do that? How do you stop yourself from falling in love?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know that's possible.
I don't know that's possible.
It might be more conceivable that you might refrain from certain physical sexual activities than the emotional part.
Exactly. Oh, some good comments. Yes, we're constantly trying to heal from our attachment wounds. Yes, and I think sometimes that's what causes the concern about someone falling in love with somebody else.
Those attachment wounds. But it also then might create this opportunity to fall in love with somebody else because we might think, well, I didn't get that in the past. I'm not getting that with my current relationship, but the next relationship might really deliver me to this, utopia where I feel like everything is great. It's that new relationship energy. We project on these possibilities into the new relationship when in fact that might not be the promised land after all. you might be able to get that within yourself, regardless of which partner, old or new, present.
Yeah, and I think we can love our partners, and we often will love them differently to different degrees and to different times, at different times. And I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went really off topic, but that was a question in the group, so I wanted to talk about it. And it all relates because it talks about, E&M talks about informed consent is needed. Like where all partners know what's going on and what their relationships might be, and consent to it, basically.
We're all partners regardless of how deep or how shallow the relationship is, that we are participants, so we are entitled to be informed that we have this consent.
Yeah.
And then, and that's what makes it.
And then as part of your agreements, you have agreements around how much you know, how much you want to know, and that sort of thing.
That's like that don't ask, don't tell idea, right?
Well, we can skip ahead to that question if you want. Is don't ask, don't tell policy still ethical?
Great question.
What do you think?
Well, I don't think I necessarily need to know the details of everything. So don't ask, don't tell as far as the details, perhaps, or maybe it turns me out, whatever the agreement is. But it is the idea, the almost philosophical idea, that we are not going to be exclusive to each other. We are not making this agreement that says we will forsake all others, whether it be physical or emotional, that there is this understanding that there may be other participants at times. There may be now or in the future something beyond just our model of exclusivity, right? So I don't necessarily need to know the details of who that person is, their name, what acts you did, how long you were together, whatever, all those things. But the idea that I am informed, the idea that you might be with other people or are with other people, and from there I might consent to that. Ethically, I've done my due diligence in letting you know where I'm at, where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think it depends on what your definition too is of what don't ask, don't tell. Because I know I spoke with somebody that in their situation, the person's don't ask, don't tell also included, I don't need to inform you if I'm going to be making plans or going on a date. So last minute notice and stuff like that. So that kind of went back to agreements and what people are comfortable with and what you can accept.
Yeah. But those last minute dates and stuff, I think it also depends on the parameters. So if you are with your nesting partner in a studio apartment, you're going to need to know those things. But if you're not living with the person, if you're not even in the same city, do you need to inform the other person? Would it be considered unethical if you did not? Do I need to, I don't see you during the week, but on Tuesday I do have a date and I go out. Should I be telling you that? But that's all part of our agreements.
Yeah, exactly.
We decide individually, yes, these are things that I want to know, or no, it's enough that I know that, yes, you potentially could be dating somebody else or doing other things or whatever your scope is.
Yeah.
But in doing that, right? So if I don't tell you that I'm going on a date, if we have an agreement about it and I don't tell you, is that cheating? Can you be cheating in an E&M?
Well, possibly. Can you cheat in E&M? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. That's the question.
I think so. I think if you're not holding up the agreements and you're then that's where cheating can occur.
Right. So whatever you have agreed to, whatever consent you were wanting from, whatever the parameters are, that you be forthcoming in it. And if you are not abiding by that, then that would be, by definition, cheating. Yeah. So I think it is possible to cheat in an open relationship.
Yeah, just as you can in a monogamous one.
Well, for sure.
Okay. The other question, what's the difference between E&M and consensual non-monogamy? I think we talked about that, that they're similar. I personally like consensual non-monogamy because I like the term consent being in it. And I think your idea when you were talking about ethical and what it means to be ethical might be different for people. Of course, I guess the same can be true of consent as well.
So is that to say in some ways it's simply a question of semantics, or is it really a philosophical difference?
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that
consent is so sexy.
In some ways, I think that E&M, in my own limited understanding of it, kind of incorporates more that it is consensual, but it is the ethical transparency related to it. But I guess in being consensual, hopefully you are being transparent and being open to all that's going to be, all the components in there in order for the person to make an informed consent.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. They're both good. I don't know. I personally like consensual non-monogamy. Okay. But that's what I would go with. We talked about don't ask, don't tell. Oh, this is a common one that comes up, I know, in lots of groups and things. When do we announce that we're ethically non-monogamous or consensually non-monogamous?
Yeah, good question.
Like whatever aspect, if we're monogamous, if we're swingers, we're polyamorous, if we have hierarchical polyamory. So, like, when do we do that with people that we're meeting, or dating, or having sex with, like potential new partners?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So if you meet somebody on the street, in a bar, at the beach, whatever, and it's organic, then yeah, when do we announce that? On a dating website, depending on the dating website, some dating websites have that as a choice, that it does give you the opportunity to announce it, and it's kind of already put out there for you. So the person comes across your profile and you announce it, or you write it in your bio that you are ethically non-monogamous or consenting non-monogamy, and it's them. But yes, when and how do you announce it if it's not invited, part of the frame already?
I think the simple answer is, when do you want to? I personally, if on a dating profile, have it listed and I feel it's important, like Wendy says at the very beginning. Yeah. I basically stay out of saying, hi, Wendy, and I'm a unicorn. Yeah, but if you're meeting someone organically, it might come up more organically, but I personally like to be more open. And I guess the question is, do you feel you're hiding something from someone? Are you presenting as single and maybe going towards people that want a monogamous relationship? So that's where you get in trouble. I have a horse in my throat today.
Lucky horse.
Sorry. Not that part of the horse.
So here's the thing. We might be not yet announcing our position and attracting people who might want monogamy when in fact that's not our shtick. And are we wasting their time and our own time? But I met somebody this weekend on the beach and I felt like there was some type of connection. I'm not quite sure. I didn't want to be too presumptuous. But I also didn't want to lead with, hey, by the way, I'm, open poly swinger, ethically non-monogamous, like this whole big title. Because I don't yet know what their intentions are. I don't know if they even feel that way about me or whatever it is. So when do I lead at that? I mean, I'm not necessarily wanting to come up with this big sign that says, hey, like I'm only looking for, this, and like go away. Like I couldn't even be your friend if we're not. But at a certain point, if they're picking up on the idea that there's some attraction, yes, when in fact do I come about it, and how might I kind of intro that into the conversation?
Yeah, and I think it's always interesting when you're in a public place, because I think there's a presumption of monogamy. Like when we're out in public or holding hands or at the beach, there's this presumption of non-monogamy. And sometimes we want to talk to people or meet people, but I feel like they've already looked at us and made a decision that we are monogamous. Right. So sometimes we want to announce our position so they are aware.
Right. Hey, by the way, that while it appears as though she could be my sister, my wife, my friend, whoever, this is actually what it is, that I am. But then they might say, oh, good for you. Like, I really wasn't that wasn't my jam. I wasn't on my radar.
I wasn't trying to pick you up. And we're like, damn.
Right. But you're absolutely right. The fact that we are together and you appear as a woman, I appear as a man, they might naturally think, oh, those two must be a couple. They must be Mr. and Mrs. or some kind of thing like that.
I think that's why sometimes people have symbols like rings. Like I have this black ring. I recently learned that women, you can get something on your nail that indicates that you're queer, which is cool. I don't do my nails, so that doesn't, there's sometimes symbols, but then people don't always understand the symbols.
Well, that's the thing, right? You might be signaling to people who already have this idea, and great, but what about all the other so-called straights, all the other people who might not know of your language and might not be able to pick up that signal? Then how are you going to announce that position? How are you going to introduce it?
Yeah, I'm seeing there's a bit of a debate in the comments about putting it in your profile. And someone responded saying it was more difficult to put it in if you identify as a man.
As a woman to put it. Do you understand what might make them say that? I think I might have.
I do.
I might have. What's your take on it?
Well, I think there might be a perception if you're a woman, identifying woman, looking for an identified man, that if you see that they're non-monogamous, you might make an assumption that they're just like a cheater, they're just looking for hookups and that sort of thing. Like people who are monogamous might easily make those assumptions.
Right, you're just promiscuous and all you want to do is
promiscuous.
Bang.
So
Right.
I think when it's a woman identifying, saying that, they're like, oh, cool. But then you get the other thing where people just think you want to hook up, and then you get all these young guys messaging you saying, hey, baby, like, show me a picture, like, and you're like, ugh. So it's kind of like
right. So I think there's considerations on both sides, regardless of your appearance, your demonstration, your genitalia. That for women, if they put that in profile, they might get a whole bunch of guys saying, "Oh wow, this chick is open for it, man!" Like, and you're gonna get like slammed in your inbox.
That's why they don't pay attention to their dating website.
Right. Exactly. Dick pic after dick pic. And if you're a dude, you might also be turning people off. They'd be like, oh, he's only into like this and doesn't want like any kind of emotional connection, or he's immature, whatever it might be, right? So yeah, it might be misconstrued that way.
Yeah, but I think like Wendy said, I was just going to make that point. You're so smart. If you're non-monogamous, why would you want someone who identifies as monogamous? And totally true. I mean, I think for some people, when they do that, they end up in a lot of situations where the person who's monogamous thinks you're going to change your mind or that sort of thing. And then you get into situations around that. So maybe it's better to avoid that, that bomb from the beginning. I don't know.
I've totally seen that. Yeah, people who are poly or otherwise might want to have to defend their position, and people who are monogamous would be like, asking almost an accusatory way. Like, I've had one person say to me, like, but you're how old and you're still not able to settle down? As if like that's the default. Like, I have to be able, that my not being monogamous is in some way a characterological deficiency, that I am, not psychically mature enough to be in that. Whereas in the other way, I could actually argue that they're not psychically mature enough to be open with their love, that they could be secure enough to be poly. But that's not the consideration. That's not what it is.
Yeah, but I love that we have this openness. Like we were talking about, you have a date tonight, and we were kind of talking about it. Like, I don't know who it is, I don't know what's going on, but I think it's great that we can do that. I feel like for me, being consensually non-monogamous, being polyamorous has really opened me up for so much growth in the way I appreciate and love people and my partners. And I think I never would have expected this. And it's been such a great experience for me. It's why we do what we do. Like, I think it's great that we can have other relationships with people. I don't feel that it takes away from you and I.
No, in fact, I feel that it adds to it. And it's interesting because this is really the first time that I've been announced in an open relationship. And I think people who've not been in this might think, well, wouldn't that make you feel more insecure? And yet this is the relationship where I felt the most secure. That you might go out on a date, but you come back to me because you want to be with me, and not because we have a marital contract or because we have some type of agreement that says we'll not see or entertain or play tennis with anybody else. You come back because you want to be back. Yeah,
it's like continually choosing that person, which is so affirming. I feel that's so affirming.
But I also like that you go out and you get stimulated sexually, emotionally, intellectually by other people, that I don't have to be, nor can I be your end all. I am never going to be everything in the whole universe as much as I might want to be. That you go out and experience that, and you come back feeling as though you were stimulated in many profound ways. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you come back because you want to come back. And if you don't come back, you were never mine to hold, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So, right, you are, it makes me feel secure even when I'm not necessarily always feeling that secure.
Yeah, I like the idea of limitless love. That's a good one. Maybe we need to use that in something.
In life.
In life.
So where are we?
I think we're at the end of the questions. I think there's some great discussion going on, which I love.
Did we want to talk about the other E's that didn't make it through? Like, I don't know, somehow I feel like it would be
like erection,
ejaculation. Like, how can we, not use the word ejaculation in our
so should we say it 3 more times and then it's included? I like the term erotocentrism. I know this was part of one of the definitions that came up in our sex therapy course that we took earlier this year. And erotocentrism, as they defined it, is when you believe that the way that you engage in eroticism is the norm. And that's usually the heteronormative way of having erotically. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. I don't really know what to do with that, but it's just like that. Some people have that belief. That
the way we are is the way it ought to be or is, and everything else outside of that is somehow a perversion?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think that when we Can I talk
Yeah.
about your parents?
Sure.
Well, so your parents subscribe and hold a lot of value to the way that they are in their relationship, and your coming out as being different was dystonic to them. They were not welcoming that idea and see your way of being as perverse, as there being something not quite right to it, when in fact it is the most right thing for you. You're flourishing in this. You're doing quite well. It doesn't seem perverse in any way. In fact, for our own point, their relationship seems kind of perverse. The idea that they should only be limited to each other. But it works for them. They're okay with that.
That would be us believing, that would be eroticism on our side.
If we were not able to entertain
the idea
ideas outside of ours, that we had to label them as perverse.
Yeah.
When in fact, it is their choice. They are free to be the way that they are. And we simply ask the same, that they might allow us to be the way that we are.
It's so interesting that because of the way I identify, now there's limitations put on me as a result by my family. Like my sister is being very specific around what activities I can do with my niece and nephew and doesn't want to expose them to my lifestyle, which is so interesting and upsetting.
Yeah, it's too bad because I wish they could actually see how much more love you allow yourself to receive. Why would anybody want to limit the amount of interaction and love that somebody's going to receive? That somehow, if you only have one partner, morally you are better. But if you have more than one partner, somehow it is corrupt. But the only thing you're doing is receiving more interaction, more love from this person. How would that ever be construed as something not held in great esteem? Wendy, female ejaculation. Yes, one of my favorite topics too. One of my wonderful fantasies is to be in the bukkake video where I am the recipient of 5 or more women ejaculating on my face simultaneously, or near simultaneous. For sure. Yeah.
So that was a cool discussion. Yeah. Oh, Aubrey, your family was the same. Yeah, it's hard, eh? We're still working through it. I have confidence that it'll get better, and it is getting better, but it is hard. I do find it hard. It's hard to be looked at differently by your family after you tell them something like this. Like it all of a sudden changed who you were. Yeah. And like I'm the exact same person the day before they knew that,
but but this one consideration somehow changes your profile, changes the cushion of your morality. But you are still the same loving, generous, caring person that you were before you announced that. It's unfortunate.
I think burying it, that it doesn't exist, is not a helpful thing. Anyway. Well, was there anything else you wanted to talk about today?
Envy over jealousy. There's another E one that had come up.
Oh, envy over, and yes. What's the difference between, envy is when you want something, like you want something for yourself. Right?
Yeah.
A little bit different than jealousy. Jealousy may include envy, would you say?
Sure. But I think for me, the idea is that I feel threatened by jealousy, right? When I'm feeling jealous, I feel threatened that I'm not going to get it and that they're having it somehow takes away from me or makes me feel like I'm not going to get it. Where I feel envious, it's like, wow, they've got that. I want that too.
Yes, sometimes people have this situation in consensual non-monogamous relationships where there's a FOMO, because often what happens, there's a disparity and one person happens to be having partners and we don't. Like they may have more opportunities come up at different times than we do. And I think sometimes that causes things for people. Yeah. So that might be where envy falls in.
Aubrey wrote that my mom didn't speak to me for almost a year after I was outed to her, a year into my first public relationship. So the cynic in me wants to say, well, maybe that was a great year off. You didn't have to talk to her. But my concern is that you were outed to her. And that is, often difficult, right? When somebody outs us or they come to find out, by the way. And, going back to your example, Tara, you chose to out yourself because of the work we're doing, because we are sex positive therapists. We want to normalize all of this and that there's nothing shameful about our position. You wanted them to know it and hear about it from you. So you wanted to be able to out yourself by your own choice to say that this is what I'm doing.
Yes.
But it'd be entirely different if they should find it. Then you don't get the benefit of the luxury of being able to introduce it for yourself and say, well, this is where I'm at. And maybe, maybe it's not any of your mother's business where you are, but you didn't want them to find out and not have an understanding to it. You chose to out yourself, and yet they, as of yet, haven't really come around to understanding it. But at least you felt as though you were able to be the one controlling the situation, as opposed to somebody else outing you.
Yeah,
So
for sure. And I think it's a choice, right? And some people don't want to share that with their family, and I get that. Like, and they don't need to. If you don't feel you need to, you don't have to. And like you said, in our situation, because of the work we do, I wanted to be the one to share that story.
Right.
And then, just so you know, if you are thinking about this and need support, you can always contact us. But there's lots of videos in the group where we had a couch conversation leading up to that. Gosh, that was like last winter, I think.
Seems like years ago.
I think it was a long time ago. I feel like it was a cold day because I had sweaters and stuff on. But we talked about what I was going to talk about. And then I did some lives where I spoke about what happened and the conversations that happened. So if you are thinking about this, then definitely reach out or watch those videos.
Interesting that you should say it felt like a cold day.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if emotionally it felt like a cold day for you as well. Being put out by coming out.
So, okay, we ended up talking more than we thought, but wanted to thank you for joining us and listening. We love understanding what is going on with you, and we love helping out because we love love.
We love love.
And we want people to have the type of relationship we have. I do.
It doesn't have to be exactly our relationship,
no,
but a loving, openly ethical, non-monogamous relationship. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And reach out if you'd like to chat. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic, sexy day.